Of the Ad Podcast. We've got a very exciting guest for you guys today, especially hot off the presses at Possible, talking about all things AI. David Berkowitz is a founder and serial marketer. He's the founder of Serial Marketer and AA Marketers Guild, rather. He's a world-renowned marketing strategist, community builder, and author who spent over 20 years at the intersection of technology and brand communication. He's currently the principal of Serial Marketer, a consultancy where he generates demand for growth mode technology firms and agencies. When he founded Serial Marketer, a thriving community with over 3,500 marketing professionals, and the AI Marketers Guild, which focuses on the practical application of artificial intelligence in marketing. In 2025, he notably sold both communities to Marketecture Media. Before he launched his own consultancy, he held top-tier leadership roles at agencies like MRY within the Publicis Group, the SVP of Emerging Media at 360i Dentsu, where he helped build the social media practices for brands like Coca-Cola, Johnson & Johnson, and Mondelez. And he's also the author of The Non-Obvious Guide for Using AI for Marketing, a foundational text for professionals looking to navigate the AI revolution without all the hype. David's penned more than 600 columns for outlets like AdAge, MediaPost, and VentureBeat, and he's been an active blogger via Marketer Studio since 2005. His philosophy centers on constant experimentation and serial learning. He's known for being an unapologetically real on stage in his consulting, often sharing both his successes and failures as he helps others to grow. On the marketing circuit, he's spoken at over 400 events worldwide, including South by Southwest, CES, and Advertising Week. He's a lifelong New Yorker, holds a BA in psychology from Birmingham University, and also a professional voiceover enthusiast and Lego builder in his spare time. David, thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate you spending a little bit of time with our audience. This is obviously your domain expertise, and what you do is kind of hot on the tip of everybody's tongue these days. I imagine you're in high supply, so appreciate you spending a little bit of time with us.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you for having me. Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, so since we were both at Possible, I'd love to, we'll get into your deeper bio, maybe in a minute, but hot off the presses, what were you doing there, and what were some of the insights that you are kind of taking away and thinking about what's next in your world?
Well, I was there with the Marketecture team. I mean, they're filming a ton and bringing folks together. It was the Ad Tech God Party. I was doing some episodes of AI Marketers Guild, and filming some of these hot takes. And they've got all these kinds of series where they were just bringing so many great agency and ad tech and marketing leaders together. So yeah, I got to learn from a lot of them, and it's it's amazing. I mean, like nearly 10,000 people down there for it or so, and just it's become a hell of a community in its own right.
Yeah, totally. Did you do any speaking, or were you mainly there doing kind of this activation?
Yeah, I was really there with the activation and doing a lot of the interviewing instead of the speaking for this one.
Sorry, I'm gonna throw it to you for one question while I close the door on my gardener who's got a weed whacker in the back.
Oh, no problem.
So why don't you take us a little bit back to kind of your origin story. I know I mentioned you studied at Birmingham University, but how did you get into the advertising industry, and what was kind of your origin story?
Yeah, well, I wasn't sure exactly what to do when graduating. I thought I'd actually go into education, wanted to be a teacher, and so I had a great resume for that. Not as great a resume for being a marketer, but I was fascinated by the idea of applying a lot of my love of writing and in maybe some kind of a non-traditional path. This was the year 2000, so internet clearly just gaining traction at scale, and it needed a lot of words written for it. And so Essentially, content development in some way or another was my first stab at it. I wound up getting a job for some .com startup that went under. Well, they let go of me 5 months later and went under just a few months after that. It was a great experience in what not to do. But I got much more fortunate with my second job going over to eMarketer and getting to work with the team there at first in an editorial role and then doing PR, and just got exposed to so many incredible people within the industry, and let alone it's just like had my own university there to learn from, and it was just like that was my real entree into what's been going on, and I've drawn from that ever since.
Love it. And, you've been big in kind of community building and B2B aggregation within our industry. You grew serial marketers to over 3,500 people. What's the key advice that you would give to either, entrepreneurs that are trying to build their own communities within their niches, or, for instance, B2B organizations that want to be community centric first? They want to be less salesy, they want to add value, and they want to pull people into their ecosystem versus constantly putting sales messages and spam and pitches out. Why is community building important from the context of B2B?
Yeah, well, it's amazing like how that pendulum kind of swings back and forth. Sometimes I'm seeing way more on the importance of community now that I have in quite some time, and I think that there's so much more. There's just so much more appreciation for owned assets and ways to deepen relationships directly without intermediaries. And so, and AI is one of the great intermediaries out there. And so if someone's connecting with your brand through AI, you really don't have control. Like even if in more, even in versions of like SEO or things like that, then if you put a page up there, like you knew what that snippet was going to be that Google would show someone. You have no idea. Now, I mean, you can use all these kinds of AI research tools, but you don't know in a given moment exactly how any of the AI platforms, the LLMs, are going to represent your brand. So taking that in the complete other direction, community becomes so important, where you can go and not just have this series of one-to-one and one-to-many interactions, but you have the many-to-many interactions, and when you really go and strike a chord with your target audience, your customers, your prospects, then they wind up doing a lot of that advocacy on your behalf, and it becomes incredibly powerful. Now, with that, it's extremely hard because how many B2B brands or B2C brands or anyone are you have you joined a community for, right? Like I'll ask you or anyone audience, right? How many would you in your wildest, could you even come up with 10 that you would want to do that for? 5 even that you would put more than 5 minutes a day in, 15, 30 minutes a week in, and participate, even just consume what's going on an ongoing basis. Like you're not going to do more than 10. You're not going to do 20 or 50 of them. Right? And you
Yeah.
have some of us might have 50 AI subscriptions right now on our own, let alone all the other marketing and ad stack and everything else. So with all this stuff, it's hard, right? And to create a community that people care about day in, day out, and that it's not even a joke. Like for me, the real metric that I use building my own communities over the years was, is this dead yet? Yeah. And if I woke up and the community wasn't dead yet, I was happy.
I love that. I love that too.
Somehow it didn't die long enough that actually found a great new home in Marketecture, but that wasn't the goal, right? It was just a very happy outcome for it.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like there was a trend where every B2B product was creating a community, like a user group for their platforms. I was a member of several, fractional, platforms or social media communities, basically a bunch of Slack groups is what it
Yeah.
was. And then I don't subscribe to any of them anymore in the last year, but really because most of them went behind paywalls.
Mhm.
Um, what do you what is your opinion about putting your community behind a paywall? I think to some degree it's smart because if people are willing to pay, and then now you've got a smaller group of people, maybe they're going to add more value. They're not going to spam. They're not going to do things that are self-promoting. You're giving a level of credibility of like, okay, the people who are willing to pay whatever the cost of admission is, $10 a month, etc.
Mhm.
This is kind of like the baseline level. It keeps kind of like, it's like same reason why people put some of their communities behind Patreon accounts in the consumer, creator ecosystem, because they don't want a bunch of bots and spammers like in their feeds. But you got to add, like you said, it's hard enough to drive engagement in a free community, and when you add the additional layer of having to pay for it, unless somebody is getting immense value from it, I think that's kind of hard. I'd be curious your perspective on paid versus unpaid communities.
Uh, I mean, I think having a paid business model for it's terrific if you can like find that right product market fit. One thing you didn't talk about there that I think winds up being a big challenge for some, and I've definitely seen and heard about repeatedly, is when you have a paid community, then you run the risk of having it all be on the sell side, right? And like a lot of
Mm.
sellers talking to each other, and everyone's just like selling at each other.
Yeah.
So, and then, and for folks on the buy side, like you want them there, they become incredibly valuable, but they might not want to pay to be in a place where they're getting sold to all the time. They might want some of these resources. And so, and also, uh, are there ways to make that up with sponsorship, and maybe there are other things like one-off courses or other kinds of add-ons that provide value, and so there are all kinds of hybrid approaches. Like I mean, there are some really successful paid communities I'm blown away by. Sometimes been a little jealous of like how well folks have been able to do like with that monetization from day one. And I think that
Mhm.
also helps if you go into this saying this is going to be a monetized community, and whether it's $10 a month or $100 a month or whatever that model is, that you're basically not going to go below that floor, and like what the investment's going to be needed from community members to fund what you want to do with this, whether it's on a part-time or full-time basis, and whether it's just you or you have a team. So, like there aren't really any wrong or right answers to it, as long as and maybe sometimes I've thought too hard about this, but like just think about that value exchange. And so if you're charging folks $100 a month for your community, but you're convinced that most folks are going to get, say, like one deal a year out of it, and those deals are going to be easily four figures and possibly five or six, then it's like you might be undercharging for it, and that's amazing, right? Like if you're charging $100 for a community, and what they're really getting out of it is something that they could take a YouTube class for free on, and just ask AI for some of the day-to-day recommendations, then you know what, like you're probably going to have to rethink that.
Yeah. How important in the communities that you've built are the online offline moments? I think the ones that have been exciting that I've been a member of in the past are the ones where it's like continuous engagement and like frequent conversation in whatever format glues people together online, whether that's, like a email listserv back in the day, or a Slack community, or even, when LinkedIn groups were actually somewhat meaningful and useful. But then, what I always found was at least once a year, they would come through and do like a San Diego meetup or an LA meetup or meetup at South by Southwest or meetup at Possible. There were these kind of organic real-time moments based on the industry where you could also, meet people in the real world other than just, coffee dates and stuff that you were setting up, in the whatever the online community was. But be curious, like, how have you bridged the online and the offline to make sure that, that creates real world engagement, real relationships, real connections?
Well, I think it's wonderful to whatever extent you can actually pull that off. And some of it depends on the kinds of resources that you have, right? If you're a B2B company and you've got a community, then being able to do a tour and go and have some happy hours or breakfasts or lunches with members of your community in each city, being able to bring folks together, like, especially even in the States, there are so many major cities that are underserved markets. And I'm talking about places like Atlanta and Dallas and Houston and sometimes even Chicago, right? Like they're just places that don't necessarily, and it depends what vertical you're in and whatnot, but where people just aren't coming together in some way. And I hear this all the time from folks who wind up moving to New York. They're like people really get out and connect with each other here. And most places that people come from, either they don't, or even like coming from LA, like that can be really hard to get across town, right?
Yeah, LA is the biggest flake city in the history of flake cities, and like you said, it's not because people are mean-spirited or like naturally flaky. It's that the traffic. It's like for evening activities, if you don't make it, you almost have to do like a community strategy within LA.
Oh, yeah.
Like when I used to run I used to run an entertainment and advertising meetup as part of like kind of an adjacency of my fraternity. It was kind of a alumni chapter professional development group. And the way that we kind of handled LA is that we would rotate the monthly get together to different neighborhoods in LA. So maybe we do the South Bay, and then we do the Valley, and then we do West Hollywood, and then we do Culver City, and we do Santa Monica. And the idea is if we kind of moved around, we would have like the core guys that were hardcore that would, drive 30 minutes to an hour to go no matter what. But then every time we did regionally, and we would get the guys that were either close to their offices, close to their houses. So it was a little bit less of a lift. But yeah, you definitely have to take in the I guess the idiosyncrasies of the city and public transportation as something you have to, bake into your in-person strategy, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So you wrote a book, The Non-Obvious Guide to Using AI for Marketing last year. What was the kind of insight that was burning in your mind that you felt like you wanted to unleash this book on the world?
Yeah, well, a lot of it was just like having something tangible where it is sitting in that mix of strategy and tactics that people can look at, where it's not just the, like, okay, what LLM should I use today? And so much of things like start down, so far down funnel. And I actually got some inspiration. I keep this in arm's length, the 360i Social Marketing Playbook. I think it's from 2008 that we released this. And so, it's actually like a pretty hard binder here that we came out with for one of our client summits. And like, yeah, there's a bit of material, back then as far as like Facebook and even some things that most people probably forgot about, like friend feed. And most of it is how to go and what's different about social channels compared to other forms of media, and how to engage with consumers and prospects through these channels. And a lot of what was in there, I think much of it is still super relevant today.
Yeah.
And so writing a book about AI and marketing is pretty daunting. And I mean, I've had my share of folks come at me way more skeptically, like, why the hell would you even do this kind of thing? And I get it too, but yeah, like having something that someone can actually just sit down with and see, like, okay, so, oh wait, like if I was going to use AI for this piece of, like, oh, how would AI fit in with things like developing the ideal customer profile and customer retention, and looking at that marketing funnel start to finish in a pretty concise, practical way. Then it was fun to try to lend my voice to all that.
That's awesome. How has the book been perceived, and how do you see people? Are you thinking about translating it into training, or I imagine you're doing some talks and some speaking on it now as well?
Yeah, I mean, done a bunch of talks, and it's definitely been a lot of inspiration for that. Like, fact is, things change so much day to day that then, like, taking some of the lessons from this book and now applying, well, okay, what do you do with this now? And then how do you then make this, help someone else make this really relevant for them? Then I mean, it definitely helps when you can bring some of this stuff to life. And I also always love in the talks that I've given, just actually going and taking a given brand, and especially using some of these content development tools, and even like a friend of mine launched this site on jinglemybrand.com, Leo Morahone. Okay. And so you create your own jingle. Yeah. And it's like, okay, maybe not every brand's going to use this as a jingle, but it's just like fun way to bring some of this stuff to life, and just gets people thinking about this a little differently. And so I love things like that, where it just makes it like really personal and visceral, and then people can see very quickly how this applies to them.
Love it. So, would you consider yourself a B2B content creator? Is that part of what you do?
Yeah, I mean, and that's, early on when I went out into the consulting side of things and started doing my own, like, kind of like pre-fractional work, then I was like, well, most of the work I had done, while I like to have my brand logo slide, every agency person sure does, that most of the work was really helping the agencies build their own credibility, and then going over to the marketing and ad tech side and software side, and helping companies like that build their credibility. And so yeah, I mean, it was fun, like hanging out at Apple's headquarters and Coke and who's who. It's like some fun stories, memories there. But yeah, like I wind up much more on the B2B side of things. Granted, there are some folks who I've talked to, like, I mean, like last year, the kinds of companies that I wound up talking about AI stuff with, including a nonprofit in the like Latin American art space, and educational travel company for high school and middle school students, a culinary institute. And so it's like, I just,
Wow.
like, all kinds of fascinating challenges and needs that come up, and all these folks that are just trying to make sense of what to do with this whole new wave of technologies and trends out there.
Love it. You've written over 600 columns. You've run your own blog. What do you think in the current state of, as of coming out of, Possible last week, what do you think is the best medium in which to create content? Is it still the written word? Is it doing guest columns because of the association with having third-party links from credible media sources? Is it, doing podcasts and doing videos and doing, short form content? Or do you need to be kind of doing everything now?
Oh, I definitely say don't do everything. That's a big trap right now. And I'll go back to a kind of touchy-feely bit of advice here, and I'll give a great example to back this up. But ultimately, it's to do what you love, and that's going to be best. And my favorite example of this was when I was on the agency side at MRY under Publicis, which you mentioned. At the time, there was a young strategist in her early 20s, Tony Dawkins. And I learned that she was doing this weekly session with the strategy team, explaining youth culture to the late 20-somethings and then the 30-somethings, and maybe even a few 40-somethings who were in the room. And I was like, we got to create some content out of this. We got to do something. I was talking to Tony, and the verdict was Tony wanted to do a podcast. Well, I'm not a podcast fan. I still don't listen to podcasts much. I like audiobooks. Whatever. Like, it didn't matter. Tony wanted to do a podcast, right? Like a woman in her early 20s. She was definitely one of the new kids at the company. I made sure that we were able to build a podcast studio basically for her.
Wow.
In the office, right? Like the AV guy, he was so excited about this stuff, and he was like putting all the foam egg carton stuff on the walls, and we invested a few grand into that, and even later when we were under Starcom MediaVest Group at the time when that group existed, and the CEO Laura Desmond, she had given talk to the thousands and thousands of folks at SMG, and was like that Tony was this embodiment of how great ideas can come from anywhere. And by the way, I didn't listen to the podcast before it went live. Once it went live, I would actually sit down at my desk with a pen and paper to look up all the references that she was sharing. I was like totally the old in the room here, and I loved it, right? And so it's like it would have been so much more boring as a blog post or a newsletter or whatever else she did. Like we just found that point of passion for the person who we could really elevate like that. And it's just, but if writing's your thing, look, like I got into this whole industry to write. Like I still love writing more than creating video. Like do what you love.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I'm exactly the opposite of you. I hate to write. I don't find myself particularly good at it. But I love to talk to people, and, turning on the camera and having a 10, 15, 30-minute conversation is very easy for me. So I do that quite frequently. And I think you're right. You have to do, if you're going to be involved in thought leadership, you got to kind of do the thing that gives you energy and the thing that, gives you passion. So I love that advice because I feel like there's definitely this, there's definitely a incentive or a thinking that like you have to have a Substack, you have to have a podcast, you have to have a newsletter, you have to be writing books. So I think that's a really salient advice. So, I'd be curious, how are you using AI on a day-to-day basis? What's the most revolutionary impact that it's been for you as a content creator, or a marketer? What is the thing that's really working for you right now with AI?
Well, the thing I love most is vibe coding. I've gotten so into it in there's so many aspects of it. I mean, I just kind of soft launch a new site literally while I was at Possible. I had some idea for something when I got back to the hotel room Monday night, and was like, and then within 12 hours, I launched the site we'vegotreceipts.com that all these kind of predictions and punditry in the industry. And you can be one of the first to see it right now. Like the idea that even a year ago, that someone like me with so little coding experience would go and take something and just start to finish within 24 hours, being able to actually launch a functioning, viable product of sorts. Like, I mean, it's crazy. And even on a more like workhorse day-to-day basis, whenever I give a talk somewhere and I've got some slides to share or something like that, or when I've done different kinds of AI training, I'll go and create a landing page on my site that has all the resources I talked about. It has all the slides to download, things like that. Really easy to make it password protected and gate it however the heck I want to. Sometimes I'll create new experiences. Like I've created a couple like games or other apps that relate to the topic that I'm speaking about. And so now it's like, by the way, not only do you not need to go and take notes on every slide here, go to this URL, scan this QR code. You can go get it right now. All the resources are there. Everything I mentioned is there, right? Like, so all of this now. And so anytime you're doing a pitch and things like that, like this aspect of it to make it more experiential is so easy and so exciting. And even if some of these things don't go anywhere, like I don't know what a business model for We've Got Receipts is. I'm not going to like invest a ton in promoting the hell out of this thing or whatever, but this is kind of fun, right? Like I've got like, if using AI, I found a bunch of my friends' predictions and it didn't rate some of mine all that highly when it found some of mine. And I decided not to put my thumb on the scale there. I'm not trying to make myself look any better than anyone else. But it's like, I just had to do this. I had ChatGPT design the logo. I gave it a couple tweaks, and then started doing things like plugging this into Google Search Console. But like, I could just do this in my spare time. I mean, it's
Crazy.
It's so crazy.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend, Joe, who used to work at Vayner, and he's launching an AI kind of boot camp cohort coming up. And he told me he was driving to dinner the other night. While he was driving, mind you, popped up Claude and vibe coded a virtual business card app while he was driving to an event, just because he didn't have one and wanted to have a business card for this new thing that he was launching by the time he got to this networking event.
So crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, we're in this world where like MVPs or, kind of I think everybody, with the obsession with like Shark Tank culture and startups and venture capital and the whole, it's like everybody has the opportunity now to at least start to experiment with their idea without huge amounts of capital, having to write a business plan, go raise money, find co-founders. It's like everything is accessible now.
Yeah. I mean, it's like for those who have that just entrepreneurial itch and just like creating things, it's incredible.
So you've been a big advocate for the fractional revolution, the CXO model. I've been a fractional for about a year and a half. Why should mid-market companies hire fractionals instead of either filling junior full-time roles or even senior full-time roles? And do you think the fractional, word has been overused? Is it too much of are there too many people that are fractionals that shouldn't be? Just be kind of curious of your take of like the current state of the fractional ecosystem.
It's messy. I mean, I think that there are plenty of times when there isn't need for someone in full-time capacity, and so that's wound up like having new options. I think is a really good thing. Just being able to have different kinds of hiring models. Like, I mean, Rashad Tabakawala, who happened to be Publicis Group's former chief strategy officer, he talks a lot about the future not fitting into the containers of the past, and so there's a lot of potential upside for everyone just like having some creative options that didn't readily exist before. 10 years ago, having like a senior hire who was part-time, it didn't necessarily make a lot of sense. but and now when things like a budget, resources, just like the scope of the project, they don't necessarily allow for full-time hire. Like for a while, I was doing what I called fraction of a fractional work, and so often just being able to get, like, especially some earlier stage companies, get further along with some of that adult in the room experience, but at a way more modest scope, where runway is such a big issue. But fractional work can be really helpful for Fortune 500s and all kinds of businesses too. I mean, I think like there's some risks involved where there are folks who you really need as you need available round the clock, essentially, and to be there as that constant for your team, right? Like there are often these situations of, well, like, why should we trust this fractional person who's not, like, fully part of the team?
Yeah, they're not fully bought in, they're not fully invested, they're not as much of part of a culture.
Yeah, and so there are a lot of downsides to that too, and there are downsides when when you have some kinds of hires where, like, a lot of the value is provided by someone just being able to focus on your brand all the time and your company and your business. And so in the, like those kinds of shower thoughts and other odd moments, they wind up funneling all into your business, right? Like, not like 10 different kinds of things that this
That's
person.
interesting. Yeah, I've never thought about the idea of mind share. It's like,
It's big. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, well, definitely on the sales side, having, I think that's one of the reasons that people, hire full-time salespeople, is because salespeople are coin operated, and they tend to work more than 40 hours a week. And because they know that if they put in, an extra 2 hours at night or a few hours on the weekend, it's like effort in equals more potential people into the pipeline. And it's ultimately just kind of comes down to math. But when you're fractional in biz dev and you're billing by the hour and you're trying to allocate, like, how do you allocate time against clients? It has to be based on some type of math around how much of their time they're paying for you. So yeah, I think, but then thinking about, like, you're talking about, like, the mindshare aspect of, if you're spending all of your professional time thinking about one company, there's something's valuable about that, just from the output of your creativity, where you just, your ideas are scattered amongst a wider breadth of potential problems and ideas and issues that you're working on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's interesting. All right, so for the trust factor, you've worked with brands like Coca-Cola and Apple. How do you think trust is going to be maintained in an internet that's increasingly flooded with deep fakes and AI-generated content? Will trust be a premium? How will trust be authenticated? How do you think about the trust factor these days?
Well, it's really so messy right now, right? And it's so hard to see what, who and what to believe, and there's so many folks trying to cut corners. I mean, there's today I just alerted a friend who runs a conference series and media company that someone had taken their handle on Instagram was available, and taken it and followed me. And at first I didn't even think anything of it. And so I was just like, okay, maybe they're just finally setting this up. And then right away I get DM'd to join this WhatsApp group for financial advice. Right? And they're like, would you like the group info? I'm like, yes, because I want to go and report this as spam. And I also want to go and send this to my friend who runs it, and said, yeah, and just have this documentation form to get this taken down, and so things like this where it's so like at first glance, sure, yeah, looked legit to me, and someone who's maybe not paying as much attention or doesn't know them as well could very easily wind up falling down this trap, right? Like so it's so easy to get burned, even like when you think you're doing the right thing, and it's and I think people have to make sure to give themselves a little bit of grace, because it's scary. Like as the first wave of Gen AI tools started coming out, and especially those that were using voice and video, and like when I first started playing with 11 Labs and some others like that, then I think about it in terms of if this was an AI generated version of me, right, which you could get from a quick sample. Someone could take a quick sample of this recording here and record an AI version of either of us, and both of us, there's a lot of material to choose from, right? It would be very easy to do. And then go and like robocall folks with this. If someone took that version of me that was AI generated and called my own mother with a script, right? Like, then she, at least depending on how good the script was, from the voice alone, she'd believe it, right? Like, I'd probably be fooled by the AI version of her and be like, oh, well, why are you calling me during the workday, Mom? Like, what's going on? But if it sounded a little bit credible, like if right away they started asking me to send them gift cards, I'd be like, okay, my mom doesn't usually want IHOP gift cards or something, but that's fine. It's just like the tech is there. Like you and I and probably almost all of your listeners, without much help, could figure out how to do this if they had ill intent. And I'm assuming your listeners don't. But so all this stuff is really scary now, which is why I think there's just so much more. It goes back to community building, goes back to conferences like Possible. It goes back to we don't have much else beyond that social capital built through real relationships that ideally aren't purely transactional, and that, like, it's hard to often quantify the value of that. Like, the guy who ultimately was behind buying my communities, the CEO of Marketecture, Eric Paparo, I met him first in 2004, 21 years before we had that exchange. Hadn't spent that much time with him one-on-one. I interviewed for a job once with him ages ago that I did not get. And so it's like, I sure as hell didn't know I'd be working for him and with him in that capacity, let alone this incredible team. And like a colleague of his, Jeremy Bloom, who I met through some of the writing that I was doing and through a mutual friend, and the mutual friend, by the way, who I did wind up working for directly at Mediaocean. I mean, it's like, so there are all these convoluted paths that have gone on for decades. And like, this is the stuff that really excites me, because it is so scary now, where it's like, are there various AI versions of me that are just like trying to pick someone's pocket out there? I'd almost be surprised if there weren't, even on some small scale, just because like we're all getting hurt by that.
Oh man, I mean, I get emails every day from people in my professional world who have been hacked, and they're sending me a PO or an RFP or money or something. And then the other thing that scammers are getting really good at is like taking context, right? So have you gotten these book club scams yet?
Oh yeah. Oh, I got the book club scams.
Yeah. That was one that I almost went for. I was like, that's kind of nice. It's just a nice group of people. They're going to read my book and they want some coffee and cookies. And then I was like, wait a minute, this just doesn't feel right. And then I just I grabbed it and I put in, book club scams on Google, and then like a whole Reddit thread came up about like all these authors that were getting scammed.
You know what I started doing, by the way? I took a couple of these and I put them up. I had some long threads with them to go and like try to fish out all their.
So you're like one of those scam busters.
Well, and then I put all that info on my blog so that when people like you search for this stuff,
Yeah.
like, because at first the first one of those I got, I actually sent to my publisher. And I was like, well, and I said to their marketing person, is this legit? And like, she wasn't sure. And then I was like, 1 or 2 emails later, I'm like, this is a scam. Avoid.
Yeah, they're getting really sophisticated. Well, I wonder if you had one piece of advice for marketing teams that are currently paralyzed by the speed of AI change. What are some of the first moves that they should take to move forward in the current ecosystem?
I'd say, nothing beats that experimental learning right now. And a lot of that you can do without needing to go and ship these things, right? And so whether it's using something like Claude Code, or even I happen to love Lovable, which is I think an even easier version of things like that for vibe coding. You can do stuff like this and never launch it, right? Like, you can go and experiment with things and try to see when are the times when you want to use stuff like this, when aren't there. Pay a lot of attention to see when is it getting things wrong, and not necessarily just creating some of this stuff just because it seems like you have to. I do think that we're also at this point, though, where one of the most fundamental differences in marketing right now is that we essentially have 2 audiences, and it's not like different kinds of customer segments and things like that. Overall, the 2 audiences are you marketing to humans or are you marketing to bots? And we have to get used to this idea that there are all kinds of these agents out there, all of these LLM AI crawlers out there that are going to take a lot of this material and go and rehash it in their own way and then deliver it as they see fit to folks. It's very different, from how we're trained to go and like try to make sure it has the right call to action on it and that the brand colors look good and all this stuff, right? Like, there is a lot of stuff. So marketing to humans is not going away. I sure as hell hope not. But now it's a whole new discipline out there. And I think that those who at least like are able to get ahead in this foreseeable future are going to figure out what that like marketing to bots piece looks like, because that is very different from just like the initial like SEO crawlers and like, the kinds of bots we've been used to for the past 20 years. These are not like, your parents or grandparents' bots.
I love it. Awesome, man. Well, David, really appreciate you spending some time with the audience today. Of the projects that you're working on right now, what would you like to send people to, or where do you want to send folks to stay in touch and continue to follow along with your thinking?
Well, look, welcome anyone to just check out AIMarketersguild.com, and we don't have a paywall up on the community, so just great to have folks who are just interested in following along. And we do weekly chats with guest speakers as well, and just create a lot of great content and bring folks together. And so happy to have more just wonderful folks who are real humans as part of this community.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the invitation. We'll make sure and promote it in the show notes. And for those of you who are following along at home, if this is the first time you're seeing the show, don't forget to give us a follow or a subscribe. If you're listening, an honest review is how we find a larger audience organically. And if there is somewhere out in marketing land that is struggling with how to implement AI within their organization, or wants to think about the trust factor or some of the topics that I talked about with David today, don't forget to share the show. Appreciate you coming on, David. Thanks for spending some time with us.
Thanks so much. Appreciate you having me.